Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you're healthy, same as your family and friends. Remember, wash your hands and don't touch your face as much as you can. Okay, in the last video, we talked about the Indian Removal Act of 1830 under the presidency of Andrew Jackson. And we're going to start looking at how is the five civilized tribes were trying to fight back this Indian Removal Act. And everything starts with this case right here, Worcester versus Georgia. Now remember, in Georgia, all of this part right here had gold. Okay? All of that part had gold. So we know about Georgia. We know it's a southern slave state. But we don't know much or hardly anything about who this guy is, Worcester. Well, he's a white Christian missionary among the indigenous tribes, especially the Cherokee. Okay, he was a defender of the Cherokee sovereignty and their land. In other words, he fought for their rights. He was white, he was European, he was Christian, but the Cherokees liked him because he always helped them. He found the first indigenous uh, newspaper, which is great source of communication. So he did good for the indigenous tribes, for the five civilized tribes, but especially the Cherokee. So what happened in this case? Well, Worcester, as a white Christian, did not agree with the Indian Removal Act, of course. So Georgia put a law as a state. Remember, state laws and federal laws. Here we go. So Georgia, as a state, puts a law where no white man can be in indigenous land or they get arrested. So Worcester says like, hey, you cannot say this because indigenous land it's out of your jurisdiction. And in other words, he claims that the Cherokee land should not follow Georgia's law because it's not part of Georgia. It's an independent nation. Remember, we talked about that in the past video, right? Domestic, right? So the indigenous, together with Worcester, went to court. Where? To the Supreme Court, because Georgia's a state. Worcester, it's a Christian missionary that believes that this law that Georgia put in it's wrong, should not be. Let's look at this a little further. This is Worcester versus Georgia. At the time, in 1832, the Chief Justice of the United States, the Supreme Court Chief Justice, is John Marshall. Okay, this guy right here. This guy was Chief of Justice for about over 30 years. Long time. He was there when Andrew Jackson, when Thomas Jefferson was there. You know, uh, he was there from like 1801. So I could tell you how long he was there. So in 1882, this case comes to his court, Worcester's versus Georgia. And this is what John Marshall ruled. It says the Supreme Court ruled in favor of the Cherokees, in favor of Worcester, in other words, against the southern slave state of Georgia. The Chief Justice John Marshall affirmed that native nations were sovereign nations according to the United States Constitution. So it means that in the Constitution it says that they are free to do whatever they want. They shouldn't follow either Georgia or any other state's laws. What does Andrew Jackson say about this? Well, Andrew Jackson completely ignored the Supreme Court's decision and proceed with the Indian Removal Act, ending in tens of thousands of Native Americans forced out of their land. Andrew Jackson, as president, right here, okay, tells John Marshall that his ruling about Georgia not having power over the Cherokee does not matter. There's a big quote, famous quote says, he made his ruling, now let him enforce it. He, meaning John Marshall. Andrew Jackson's pretty much telling the Supreme Court Chief Justice of the United States, hey, yeah, whatever you say, what are you going to do about it? Not much. Why? Because Andrew Jackson has the army. The Supreme Court does not have the power to use the army, remember, guys. The president does. So he tells, well, your ruling is that Georgia should not mess with the native Cherokees. But I say, let's remove them. And that's exactly what they did. Okay, guys, this is Worcester versus Georgia. Make sure to uh, read and answer the questions on the Google form. And I'll see you on the next video about the sad, one of the saddest moments of America called the Trail of Tears. Bye, guys.